As a gardener who has lived in Texas the majority of her life, nothing gets under my skin more than when people say, I just can't grow anything in Texas. Texas doesn't grow anything. It's just too hot. The soil sucks. Blah, 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 blah. Texas grows plenty of stuff, okay? So let's talk about all of the thriving perennials that require very little maintenance here in my Texas backyard that are doing just great. Now, one of the reasons Texas gets a really bad rap is because of the weather. We are really, really hot for a few months out of the year and the plants really struggle. But it always baffles me because nobody really bats an eye when up in the north, when it's winter, the plants literally go dormant or they struggle and they look different for a small period of time. And then the weather gets better and then all of a sudden they look like they're supposed to. But for some reason, when it's related to the heat, we don't seem to have the same tolerance for the plants not looking as healthy. So before we get started, I would just encourage you to think about that. Now, this corner are some of my little baby perennials. This is actually a bay laurel, as in like bay leaf, as in what you cook with. And let me tell you, when you start cooking with fresh bay versus the dried stuff you get in the store, absolute game changer. Bay laurel does really, really well, honestly being neglected. The reason it has these brown tips on the leaves is because I was over watering it all fall and just kind of forgot how easy they were to take care of. So bay laurel is a great addition to your landscape. It comes back every year and honestly they get huge and they're really pretty, they smell amazing, and you can actually cook with them. Behind it, I have 2 yarrow plants. Yarrow is also technically a medicinal herb, but it's also really beautiful. It has this like really kind of fern-ish quality to it. And even though it doesn't look amazing right at this very moment, it has been thriving there for probably like 8 months, and it's definitely gonna come back. Oh, there's a bee, okay. Everything's fine. Now, another thing that should get a lot more credit than it actually does are roses. So I'm doing a whole video about this next week where I'm going to talk about building my rose garden next year. It's one of my big kind of like themes of the year. It's a big priority for me. But roses actually do really well here in Texas. And not a lot of people know that, and not a lot of people plant them. So let me talk to you a little bit about roses. So roses are something that are very new to me, but are not new to Texas. There's a lot of places in Texas that have like really historic rose growing roots, for, you know, lack of a better term, pun intended. But the way that I choose to go about getting my roses was through a company called Heirloom Roses. And Heirloom Roses has a really good track record of providing really healthy roses and also providing own root roses. So own root roses are roses that are grown on their own roots. They're not grafted. So a lot of different roses will be grafted, therefore like the genetics can be weaker and the disease resistance can be weaker. And so I chose to go the own root rose route. That was hard. And I have one gold medal rose in the corner that is like thriving. Literally it froze like 4 times last week. This rose is still blooming. It's wild. So roses do really, really well here in Texas, and I'm really excited to plant more of them. I wish more people planted more of them because of how well they grow here. I think a lot of people, especially like this was at least me, so I always thought of roses as being a cool climate plant, but actually there is so much like breeding of roses and there's so much tooling with different kinds of factors of roses that there's a rose for everyone and everything. We're going to talk more about this for the rest of the year, but I got roses that are partial shade tolerant. I got roses that are great for containers. I got roses that are like climbing. I got all kinds of stuff that I'm really excited to try out and test out with you guys. But yeah, I just mind blown on the whole rose thing. It's such a beautiful plant to add to your landscape, to your front yard, to your backyard, wherever. And I have had to do very minimal maintenance. I've had this one rose bush almost a year. Very, very minimal maintenance on this rose bush, and it puts off like the most beautiful blooms. So yeah, roses in Texas, extremely underrated. Full disclosure, I did end up partnering with Heirloom Roses after I had purchased from them, and I posted about it, and now we're working together to provide you guys 20% off. So there is a link down in the description as well as a coupon code for 20% off roses. The website's really easy to navigate and it's really easy to find what you need by zone, by what your preference is. Like, you can find a rose for you Even if you live in an apartment, get a container rose. If you live somewhere where all you can have is a pot and it's partial shade, get a partial shade container friendly rose. There's literally a rose out there for everybody, and if you're not ready for it now, you can ship it later. You can pick a ship date in the future, which means it would also be a really good gift for somebody. So yeah, I really believe in this company the more I learned about them, and that's why I'm really excited to be partnering with them, to bring you rose content, but to also make your rose dreams come true and convince all you Texans that you can grow roses, that they're really pretty. The other perennial that grows really well here are blackberries. So these are a bunch of blackberry bushes, and actually they're going to be interplanted with roses. They look a little purple right now because they're about to lose their leaves once we have this other freeze coming up. But they do incredibly well with our like torrential downpours. So blackberries are actually like creek loving plants. And so because in Texas, when we get rain, it's like all at once, we get like multiple inches at a time. Blackberries thrive in that kind of environment. You do have to baby them a little bit through the hot months of the summer, but you're gonna have to baby any plant that you plant through the hot months of the summer. Your blackberries are no different. And the more they get established, the less water they'll need to be babied through there. And blackberries are delicious. Texas blackberries are amazing. Now there is a little bit of a debate on thorns or no thorns. Most of my blackberry bushes are no thorns because I just don't want to be scared of my beds. However, there's a bit of a myth, or maybe it's true, who knows, that thorned blackberries are sweeter. I have yet to test if that's true or not, but it's just something to note. It could be true, who knows? This is that rose bush, by the way. It is blooming. Guys, we had freezing temperatures every night last week for like a week straight. I didn't cover this thing at all, and it's still blooming. Like, roses really can take the extreme temperatures of Texas. Just have a little bit of faith, have a little bit of trust, you know? Now this is probably gonna seem like a weird one, but it's one that I have to talk about because fruit trees. So I have lots of fruit trees. I think I'm up to 10. I have 3 different peach trees, 2 plums, a pomegranate, and some citrus. Now the citrus, honestly, I have a toxic relationship with trying to grow citrus in the ground, so we're not even going to talk about that. But growing peaches and plums here in Texas, and pomegranates, is something that, like, whenever I see an empty backyard, I'm like, why don't you just like throw a fruit tree in there, you know? That would probably be cool. Because these fruit trees, they do really well here. So as long as you pick a variety with a good amount of chill hours for your area, that's gonna be what you need for peaches and plums. And then pomegranates, very, very similar. These are all beautiful trees that produce fruit. And trust me, they don't require that much work. Like, I fertilize them maybe a couple times a year. I mulch them. I'm getting ready to prune them because they've grown so fast. But fruit trees, they're not technically like a perennial plant because they're a fruit tree, but they come back and they're beautiful and they give you something. And I think they are a totally underrated thing to be putting in your backyard that will do really well here in Texas. So something else that people forget about a lot in Texas to grow in your backyard are grapes. So these are actually Tempranillo grapevines, and yes, like Tempranillo the wine. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to make wine, but grape leaves actually grow really, really well here in Texas. They absolutely love the heat. They really like bad soil. I don't know why, but they like having not great soil. And a lot of people will grow muscadine grapes here. So muscadine grapes are extremely tart, but they grow beautifully and you can make jelly out of them. It's not my favorite, but just having the beautiful foliage and the grape leaves is a really, really fun addition to your backyard. Grapes are one that lose their leaves and then you have to prune them and then they get their leaves back. So they require a little bit of maintenance, but overall they kind of just like grow. Like, they grow so well. And if you're wanting something that's another kind of like really vigorous grower, also look into passion vine. So passion vine is another very vigorous grower. I actually have one that I that is shade tolerant that I've been nursing along for a while that's going to go in my rain garden that we're about to see. But passion vine is another great option if you're looking for a perennial in Texas that's super easy to take care of. All right, now this area over here was my answer to my rain problem. So this is our rain garden. That was probably my favorite project we did last year. So let's talk about all the plants in here. Some of them are native, some of them aren't, but all of them have really, really thrived. I know I said thrived, and that's like the opposite of what's happening behind me, but this elephant ear for most of the year has looked absolutely phenomenal. We had a freeze last week, so the foliage is starting to die. But what will happen is, because this is so thickly mulched, the roots and the bulb will live, and then this beautiful elephant ear will come back when the temperatures warm up in like 6 weeks. It really won't be very long. And so I have 2 elephant ears in here. One of them is this darker variety, and then this one is called like a red punch straw something. But really this is kind of like the mainstay of this corner. And the reason I call this our rain garden is because we live on a small slope, and so all of the rain would pool, and we'd end up with like a we called it the little pond right here outside our window, and we didn't really want that sitting up on the foundation of our house. And we had just replaced a bunch of stuff inside the house, so instead of digging a French drain, we decided to build a rain garden, and it's been more successful than I could have ever thought. So elephant ears do really, really well in very wet places, and they also do well in the shade. So during its peak, this elephant ear was as tall as our fence. It was massive, and it was gorgeous to look out our living room window, see this big elephant ear. Now I am excited because I think this rain garden will actually look 10 times better this year in its second year, because some of the other plants are starting to really fill in and mature. So this plant right here is called a long spur columbine, and it's actually done really, really well with all the cold weather we've had, and it puts off like the most gorgeous yellow flowers right out of the center that are like nice and tall, and then it has this really beautiful green, almost like parsley looking foliage. So this one is native and will do really, really well in any Texas perennial garden with very minimal care. I planted this thing and haven't touched it since, other than watering it during the summer when it needed it. And this plant right here is called inland sea oats. The inland sea oats has the most beautiful seed head on it. They really kind of got crowded out by the elephant ear this year, so they weren't really able to get to their full potential, but I think they'll kind of fight for their spot and fill in really, really nicely this year. So inland sea oats, another great shade loving, very water loving plant. Now I wanted to show you these very specifically. This is what's left over of an obedient plant. Now if you've never heard of obedient plant, they put off the most beautiful purple flowers. They are gorgeous. And the other cool thing about obedient plant is if you see all of this down here, obedient plant self-seeds itself. So if you put obedient plant somewhere, it will reseed itself and come back year after year after year after year, which is just awesome because the flowers are so gorgeous. Again, super low maintenance. The only thing I did to this plant was put it in the ground and then water it when it was really hot in the summer and it wasn't raining. And then lastly, that's in our rain garden this year, is this wood fern. I know it's a little hard to see, but in general, it's doing really well. I had another one on the other side, and then my husband accidentally dug it up because he thought it was dead. It was just dormant. So wood ferns are another really great Texas native that do really, really well with extremely minimal maintenance. They are a little more sensitive to the heat is what I found, but in general, very, very easy to plant, especially in the shade. Okay, editing Brooke coming at you because my battery died while I was trying to finish that video. In conclusion, plant any of these plants, plant one of them, plant a few of them. Whatever you do this spring, while you're thinking about spring, while you're planning house projects, backyard projects, think about adding a few plants, whether it's for the pollinators, for yourself, just because you want to try something. Plant something, please, in Texas. We all need it, and honestly I'm really sick of seeing like sad only grass backyards. And don't forget, if you want to try out some roses from Heirloom Roses, I have a 20% off coupon code in the description as well as an affiliate link. All of the plant names that I talked about will be listed in the description as well. Thanks so much for watching. Happy gardening. We'll see you next time.